Cryptids are a truly fascinating class of beings. Sort of beings that dedicated science can't quite confirm, but have been spotted, seen, and reported by plenty of people over the course of usually very many years. It is a field that is largely dominated by the famous and the most well-known members, because after all, as soon as a species is confirmed and recorded by science, then their entire appeal is over. Getting bagged and tagged by any sort of conventional group means you kind of get moved into a far more boring and far less interesting realm of natural history and legitimacy. We only need to look at some of nature's most preposterous offerings to see why the idea of cryptids and their prevalence has been so consistent and grown over the years. Take the example of the platypus. Everything reported about it made it seem like the most elaborate and the most blatant scientific fraud all at once. Here was a mammal that looks like something a beaver would evolve into in the universe of Pokemon. There's nothing in the description, the behavior, or the appearance, along with like the general morphology of the platypus, that would even seem reasonable, and yet it exists. It walks the earth to this day. It lives and has lived for multiple years as proof that just because something does not tick all the boxes, it doesn't mean that it can't exist. When we add in events such as the appearance of the colossal squid off the coast of Japan, then it starts to kind of blur the lines between what exists as legend and what is actually out there in reality, but just has been seen by many. Some of these mythical creatures are a little more believable than others, and while it may be difficult to decide where you stand on whether it's real or not real, really just a figment of someone's imagination, it's kind of just up to you. But I think it's probably fair to say that in this one, may not have many believers. So we're headed off to the great state of Colorado, deep into the Rockies, and no, it isn't the most famous cryptid of all, Bigfoot, that's under the microscope today. While it has been spotted in the same region, this is something different. Something that's actually larger. This is the slide rock bolter, a creature that is truly monstrous in size, in habit, and in the threat that it posed to those that have lived, worked, and traveled in the mountains. It isn't just unusual for cryptids to be blamed for people disappearing. In fact, even in our modern age, with all the technology and information that we have at hand, sometimes when someone vanishes, people just will look beyond the proven and the scientific to try to find answers. And sometimes they come up with solutions that may be a little hard to understand, but it is 100% a human thing to do. In the absence of information, the human brain will go to some pretty dark places. If the descriptions are to be believed, then the slide rock bolter is truly enormous. Its weight is in the tens of thousands of pounds, with a huge body and an enormous mouth. Some illustrations have it looking like a bizarre land-bound whale, which, if you didn't know, actually whales were land-bound way back in the day. So how on earth is this creature of such immense size supposed to move? And how was it not discovered by science and recorded correctly at any point in time? Surely there is nowhere in the world remote and sparsely populated enough that such a creature would go unnoticed, right? Well, maybe, unless you're in the mountains and nobody's around. Also, I just want to point out, if I sound a little hoarse, the new year got me. So speaking of going unnoticed, that's where a very unique method of attacking its prey has actually come into play. The slide rock bolter has a tail which it uses to hook onto the top of many mountain slopes. It prefers these steep slopes where its massive bulk will still be able to move down under the force of gravity, but it sits there, hooked on by its tail, waiting silently for unsuspecting people or prey to pass below it. When the time is right and a suitable group of victims have wandered into its path, that is when it strikes. By releasing its grip on the top, it hurtles down the side of a mountain, its mouth sitting wide open. The unsuspecting people, bears, elk, moose, whatever below, never stood a chance, gulped down inside its mouth and caught up in the avalanche of rocks and mud coming down in its wake. The massive impact would destroy not only the mountainside itself by causing these rock slides, but sometimes the rock slide bolter would take out trees and substantial portions of forest in its relentless pursuit of human prey. Once it had succeeded and finished its slide, it would hook onto the next available hilltop on its descent and then repeat the process, waiting once again for its next victim. While a lot of this sounds debatable at best, it's worth noting that the stories about the rock slide bolter have been reported from the 1800s onwards, which is when it was, founded, I suppose. There have been multiple people that have attested to either seeing the creature itself or, more commonly, bearing witness to the aftermath once it had finished its destruction. Because, the first thing I think about when a rock slide happened is a giant creature. But it would be the woodsmen and lumberjacks and the people who do mining that first came back with reports of this creature. Somebody checked their blood alcohol content. Describing it as similar to a whale, they spoke about the hooks that it used to latch onto the mountainside and presumably move around if it ever found itself stranded somewhere away from a suitable hilltop. Even more fantastical details were added, ones that seem very difficult to either justify or even understand how people would have spotted and known these things. Apparently, it would use its saliva that was coming out of its gaping mouth to allow it to slide down the hillside at a greater speed, and it preferred slopes greater than around 45 degrees. It became enough of an issue at one point that an intrepid park ranger came up with a plan to try and trick it. What they did was create a decoy tourist, dressed with clothes and hiking gear, and position it where they believed the creature was waiting. Except they stuffed this odd scarecrow full of explosives and then they waited. Sure enough, the slide rock bolter took the bait and came storming down the hillside the next day, leaving its usual path of destruction and gobbled up the entire thing. It is said that the explosion that followed was substantial enough to wipe out most of the nearby town of Rico. As in everything else, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and surely this sort of claimed creature or event that would be large enough and prolific enough to leave behind a clear body of evidence would require a clear body of evidence. In a revelation that will surprise probably no one, there have never been any photographs ever captured the elusive land whale, nor have any remains ever been discovered for scientists to examine. If this creature, or several of them, as no one seems to be confident about whether this is just a singular creature or a species of them, was truly terrorizing the Colorado Rockies for as many years as it had, then how come there are none of the corpses left behind for others to find? What has been left, and is impossible to deny, are the physical remnants of a sort of devastation that the slide rock bolter is supposed to have caused. Large swaths of rock have been sent tumbling down the hillside, boulders and mud that have devastated forests, trees, and even settlements. In an expansive place where this sort of natural phenomenon happens actually similarly regularly, no one is going to be able to deny that some of the behaviors of the rock slide bolter and their after effects were visible. It's just whether this was truly the cause of them or not. In addition, there have been other people who have disappeared in these remote mountain areas. A decent number over all the years the creature has basically been said to be active. It's kind of actually been a little disturbing. So while this is sadly not uncommon, the terrain of the locale does not really lend itself to people, not getting hurt or taken out, and they can really just disappear without a trace. And while most of these can be chalked up to accidents or incidents in part of the world where help is not readily available, look at the Donner Party, which I did a video over that if you're interested. These have been attributed to the strange mountain hanging slide rock bolter and their appetite for tourists. Stories of this creature are not just limited to local legends and word-of-mouth stories either. While the initial tales will have come straight from these mountain men trying to convince others that they know what they saw up there in the back and beyond, William T. Cox released a book in 1910 that was titled The Fearsome Creatures of Lumberwoods and featured the rock slide bolter as one of these beasts. It was fully illustrated throughout and gave both a background and a technical name to each creature, the bolter being known as the Leviathanetta mucoperlentius, although there are scientific names offered and accounts from people who have allegedly encountered these animals. It is admitted in the book that it openly states this is based on mainly folklore. It was then remade in 2015 by Hal Johnson with 20 animals inside. These include the gumbaroo and hodag and the cactus cat, as well as the slide rock bolter, who gets a very detailed write-up. His weight was given at 25,000 pounds, and more specifics of its anatomy are described alongside illustrations once again, showing that no matter what people think, the slide rock bolter has lived on the collective memory of the population for at least 200 years and beyond. So there you have it, the tales of the slide rock bolter and the testimony of those that have witnessed the aftermath of its interactions with people, the devastation it left in its path, the destruction of the land, and the loss of those good people. And normally, this is the part where I tell you it's up to you what you believe and what you want to believe. Look at all the evidence that has been set out, to read the descriptions and the versions of events and decide for yourself. Maybe even have a search for yourself on either more stories that have been missed, or better yet, for the artist's depictions, give an idea of what these creatures look like. But just for once, it seems appropriate to just come out and say that the slide rock bolter, it probably doesn't exist. Not in the form that has been described anyways. It's actually 50,000. Now, while a certain dose of belief and an ability to think beyond the normal confines of our minds is healthy and even necessary, there have to be at least some limits. It simply wouldn't be honest to try the both sides that the existence of a bunch of 25,000 pound monstrosities are hanging on the hillsides by their tails, waiting for an unsuspecting passerby to assault. Instead, the question you have to ask yourself this time is about the nature of the beast. Were these people, over the course of many years, truly describing a monster that they believed they saw? Were they laying down for all eternity and swearing on everything that's holy and dear to them that this was a legitimate thing? Or they witnessed with their own two eyes? Or is there a chance that it was just a metaphor of sorts? Realistically, in the rugged and wild regions where the sightings are said to have happened, how likely is it that these men were truly believing that they bore witness to these beasts of mythical proportions? On balance, it seems far more likely it was a euphemism of sorts, a way to soften the blow and dial down the pain of what would have been a devastating event. Someone losing their life to rock slides or landslips, or even the loss of substantial property, or a good route being blocked by falling rocks. All of these things would be completely devastating at the time. It frankly doesn't seem likely that the sorts of men who made their living off the sweat of their brows and with calluses all over their hands would truly believe that this was a real event. Instead, it may have just been something like a sailor going to a watery grave when they simply drowned, or a much-loved pet going over Rainbow Ridge. Either way, it seems to have captured the minds of enough people that we're still talking about it today, multiple centuries after it was first reported. And in a way, that's an achievement all of its own. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leave a like would be great, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I know it took a break there. I was dealing with some personal things in life, and it was just basically about keeping the main channel afloat at that point. Starting to recover, getting better. Life is still a little tumultuous, but hey, what's the old saying? Calm waters never made a skilled sailor. So if you did enjoy, just please leave a like as it gets it out there. I think I already said that, but I'd also like to thank my patrons real quick. First, at the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West. Thank you, sir. Then at the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Wet Skeleton. Ooh, God. And then at the first-hand accounts, we have Cody Cherry Drake, Kanan Johnson at the second-hand accounts, along with Fred Rush, Justice Davis, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I appreciate you guys as well. Your help goes a long way towards keeping this channel running. I know, like I said, there was a pause for a minute, but I'm coming back. And I'm thinking about changing some of the content for like the 12th time on this channel, doing like ARGs and stuff too. So, I know what you guys think about that. But anyways, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.